You can't just jump into something and it be passive. Especially in real estate, you have to have three things to have success. It's time, it's experience, and money. And if you're a veterinarian, you probably don't have time, and without time, you can't get the experience. And in that scenario, the most likely option for that person scales usually taking their money or their capital and investing it with somebody else that does have the time and the experience.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Clint Harris. Clint is a professional real estate investor, entrepreneur, and handles capital raising and investor relations at Nomad Capital. He owns Going Coastal Property Management and hosts the Truly Passive Income podcast. So, Clint, like I said, I'm going to let you tell your story in your own words. But first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the show today. I truly appreciate you taking out the time. I know had to reschedule on you the first time. So I'm excited to get to have this conversation and get to learn more about you and let the listeners know more about you. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being here. And frankly, I'm excited for the conversation because a lot of what I talk about is just like money related or real estate related. And to me, frankly, that's a little bit shallow. And a lot of times I think we need to be looking deeper than that and remember, like, why are we even doing all this?
Yeah.
I have a feeling the conversation is probably going to go in that direction today. So I've been looking forward to this, and I'm glad to connect with you. So thanks for having me on. My name is Clint Harris. I'm 42 years old as of 3 days ago. I'm married 12 years. Thank you. I got two little boys. I got a 5-year-old and a soon-to-be 2-year-old. We live in Wilmington, North Carolina, on a little island called Carolina Beach, right off of Wilmington. So I had a 16-year career in medical sales. I used to implant pacemakers and defibrillators, so I worked in cardiology. That's kind of a young man's game. You're on call. You're working nights and weekends. It can kind of chew you up. So a lot of getting called 2 or 3 hours away at 3 in the morning, a couple times a week. Heart problems are not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5, right?
No.
So I love my job. I was blessed to be pretty good at it, but I knew if I ever wanted to have an off-ramp from that lifestyle, I was probably going to have to build it myself. I believe that for the most part, the ability for our generation to save their way to retirement has largely been taken away from us. Our parents and grandparents had pensions and 401ks and Social Security, and it's not going to be the reality for this generation. So I chose real estate as the vehicle by which I was after, at the time, I was after financial independence, right? The buzzword, the financial freedom, that's what I was going for. And I have some problems with that, but we'll unpack that a little bit later. I started down that pathway. My first property when I was in my early 20s was a duplex. I was living in one half, renting out the other. Thought I was a genius and had invented something new that turns out people have been doing for over 1,000 years. I started buying small single-family homes. Got a couple of them wrong, got a couple of them right. When we had 9 properties, by then I was married, I realized it's a really slow way to get ahead. Very, very slow. And, if you're refinancing properties, the BRRRR strategy to get money out to go on and buy the next one, you're cannibalizing your cash flow. And, every time I would have a tenant move out, I would have a couple $1,000s worth of repairs that I had to do to the properties. And it was cannibalizing, half a year or a year's worth of cash flow. So I followed the same trajectory that we hear a lot of times, is that single families was not the way for me to go. In 2017, my wife and I relocated to Wilmington, North Carolina, for me to take over the medical sales territory. And that's a beach town. We got 4 beaches in pretty close proximity. So that opened up the opportunity of short-term rentals. So in 2018, we started buying small multifamily properties, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, and with bad long-term tenants in place, and converting those into Airbnb properties. It went very well. I still own 3 quadplexes and a duplex. That turned into, well, let me tell you something I did wrong there. Again, I was focused on the financials, and I was successful in replacing my income from those 14 Airbnb listings that I had. I would take, somebody might be paying $1,000 or $1,500 a month as a long-term renter, and then it's going to make $3,500 to $5,500 a month as a short-term rental, right? So massive swing with the asset class conversion. And I was able to replace my income, but what I didn't get was time or location independence, right? Even when I wasn't on call for the hospital, I still had 14 units that I managed. I had to have my phone on me all the time. I couldn't go anywhere, especially for the summer during the busy season.
Right.
And I realized that I had done it wrong again for the second time, is that I was focused just on the financial independence. And what I think that we really all want, and I think this plays into your know your why, is we're all really looking for time, financial, and location independence, because those three things together create what I call an independence of purpose. An independence of purpose is where you have the freedom with your spouse or your partner or your family. You figure out what's the most important thing for you and what do you want to do with your time on this earth. And in order to accomplish that, you have to have that independence of purpose, time, financial, and location independence, where you're not stuck in one spot or spending a large chunk of your life trading your days away to somebody else for money and probably paying for their days off. So I tried to find someone who could manage those Airbnb properties for me. I couldn't find anybody that could get the same numbers that we were getting. So I had to spend 2 years building a property management company. We have partners in that company, but we still own 14 Airbnbs, and we're co-owners of a property management company that manages my listings and another 70 listings on top of that. So at this point, it looks very passive. I would just remind everybody that it's residual. I just front loaded all the work for 2 years building it out. Now I just have quarterly meetings and I get an owner's distribution check. So it looks passive. I think it's important to distinguish the difference between passive and residual. And at that point in time, I realized I'd built up 2 portfolios and done it the wrong way. So I said, okay, if we're going to do this again, the question for me has always been, what's the highest and best use of every dollar that I have to invest? And by this point in my investing career, I learned that if you're taking on any real estate project, it takes up a certain amount of your time and mental energy. So if that's the case, like if you're going to take a bite, why not take the biggest bite that you can?
Sure.
So that's kind of where I was up until that point in my journey. And I realized that what I really wanted was that independence of purpose. The way that I went about identifying how I was going to do that was I found people smarter than me, which is not that hard to do. I found a group of older, successful real estate investors that had the type of life that I was looking for. And I was like, what did they do? Like, these people have long storied careers, and over a period of 30 to 40 years, where did they end up? Because if I can draw backwards from that, maybe I can save myself 10 years here. And ultimately, it came down to 3 things. It was hard money lending, and I didn't have the 7 figures till you get started there. It was mobile home parks. Keep in mind, with my short-term rentals, I have 6 to 8 tenants per month in each property, and I was a little bit burned out on tenants. And the third thing was self-storage. And I was like, okay, hold on, let me get this straight. It's a rental property, but there's no kitchens, there's no bathrooms, and there's nobody living in the property, as long as you're doing it right? So that appealed to me, and I'm a big believer in networking and relationships. Through our local real estate meetup, I met my partners, which are a father and son team that had been doing storage since 2006, and then started doing conversion projects, like buying an old warehouse and converting it into storage. That strategy leapt off the page at me because it's what I was already doing. I was buying a bad quadplex for 500 grand, converting it to an Airbnb, and now it's worth $1 million and cash flowing 80 grand a year, something like that.
Yep.
So the asset class conversion, or the adaptive reuse, jumped out at me. So in 2020, my partners and I, and some of the physicians that I worked with, we bought an old Kmart building, bought a building for 1.5 million. We put 2.5 into it, and as a stabilized self-storage facility, it appraised for 9. We're like, oh, this is real money. Got it. So we did another Kmart, then we did another one, and then another one, and then another one. And then in 2022, I left medical sales, took off my scrubs for the last time. Currently, I'm one of the general partners with Nomad Capital. We've got 4 general partners. We have 16 employees. We have $150 million worth of climate-controlled self-storage facilities under management. We're on the process. I'm wrapping up a $10 million fund right now. 2-year goal is to get to 300 million. 5-year goal is to 500 million, and 10-year goal is $1 billion. With a tribe of real estate nomads, so that we can pursue our independence and purpose.
Yeah, it's I mean, a lot of what you shared resonates with me. I am a surgeon. I'm a veterinary surgeon, and one of the things that sort of I still do it, but sort of made me want to pivot in the way I approach things was the on call that you talk about. Like that's a very draining thing to do for your life. Like
Yep.
it's one thing when you're sort of early on, you're young, you're when I was in my training years, like my residency and stuff like that, it was like, this is just how it is. I have to do this for, these next 4 years, and then but like it didn't stop. It didn't go away. That piece of it didn't go away.
Right.
And I realized, it's one thing to do that when you're kind of on your own. It's quite a different thing to do when you have kids. Like my kids are, I'm older than you, but my kids are basically the same age. So it's like, that was when that shift happened for me in realizing that, kind of that vehicle, that, he said, independence of purpose. I think everyone should invest. I think real estate's, I personally think it's probably the best investment vehicle, but it is just that. It is a vehicle to get, sort of time freedom, financial freedom's a piece of that. But like, really, like you said, being able to kind of work can look like however you want it to. But I agree that passive is probably a little bit of an overused term, at least. I think passive income is great, but you don't start there. Like, unless you're already extremely wealthy and can put a whole bunch of money in passively, that's going to into an investment that's going to cash flow for you, there's no way to be completely passive out of the gate. You have to have some active income, whether that's as a doctor, medical sales, a lawyer, whatever it is. Like, somewhere money has to come in, but you have to build, like you did, build a portfolio of investments, and maybe that pivots over time. And I'm sure, like, you talked about sort of the management and stuff like that involved with the asset classes you had chosen. I think those are experiences that come into play, but I also think it has to do with markets, right? I don't know if you agree, but
Yeah.
for a while there, people could make a ton of money on short-term rentals, and now a lot of places, not necessarily Wilmington, but like a lot of places have changed regulations. The prices got driven up by all the demand, and so it's maybe not quite as good as it was 3 years ago. A lot of real estate is like that right now, but I think your points about self-storage is something that I've thought about a lot. It's a combination of business ownership and real estate. Like, it's a business
Right.
that comes with real estate, and you don't have to. You deal with very little of the, I guess, human element that you have when you're talking about, whether it's short-term rentals or single family or even apartment complexes, all that. There's a very real human element that comes into play, and self-storage takes, I would say, probably most of that away. I'd be curious to hear you talk a little bit more about kind of at each of those phases in your life, maybe why the asset classes were appealing to you, and how that sort of tied into, if it tied into, sort of the markets we were in.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't know you were a veterinary surgeon, by the way. My dad was a veterinarian and
Oh, cool.
retired now, but I spent my entire childhood watching him be on call. He was a private practice veterinarian. It was just
Yep.
him, and tucking us in for bed and then going back to the clinic to check on the animals that he did procedures on that day. So I know that lifestyle, and I've lived on call as well. So yeah, I think that obviously there's a large appeal to getting out of that lifestyle, and you're exactly right. You can't just jump into something and it be passive. Especially in real estate, you have to have three things to have success: it's time, it's experience, and money. And if
Mhm.
you're a veterinarian, you probably don't have time, and without time, you can't get the experience. And
Right.
in that scenario, most likely option for that person to scale is usually taking their money or their capital and investing it with somebody else that does have the time and the experience. But again, we all take this journey through our investing career. I see a lot of people, especially in their like mid 50s, 60s, they've done all the active things over the years. And finally, they get to the point where instead of flipping houses and making 30, 35%, they'd rather make a little bit less and not have to do anything. So I think we all eventually will get to the point where our time is worth more than anything else. If we know that now, I think we can start preparing for it a little bit early. In terms of the asset classes that I was looking at, again, self-admittedly, I did it wrong. The single family houses that I bought, it was because it was low hanging fruit. Between 2010 and 2013, I bought 9 single family properties because I could buy them for $30,000 to $35,000 in Columbia, South Carolina. Still in that post 2008 crash, I was easily hitting, I'd be all in on a property for 30 to 35 grand, and it's renting for 750, 800 bucks a month. So well above that 2% rule. We were crushing it. In my head, they're always going to be $40,000 houses, and I'm going to save up enough money to buy 1 or 2 a year. Once I've got 10, I'm making 60 grand a year and I'm retired, right? This is like 24-year-old me talking.
Right.
And sounds like an idiot, right? But the reality is that asset class, yes, there was cash flow, but they're never really going to appreciate. They were not Section 8, but they were not much better. And the reality is, first of all, it's a very slow way to scale, and I don't want to be a slumlord. But that was the low-hanging fruit. Now, the good news is I learned a lot of the lessons there, most of which from things I did wrong, some that I got right. But when they're such cheap properties, they're not as expensive lessons if I was messing with $300,000 or $400,000 properties. So then when we relocated to the beach, again, first thing is I remembered my first house and not having a mortgage. So when we relocated to the beach, my primary objective was to eliminate my housing expense. So we bought a duplex 2 blocks from the beach. There was a 3-bed, 2-bath in each half. We lived in one half. We rented out the other half as a short-term rental, and we did 57 grand that first summer. And I was like, oh, this is real. And I ran the numbers and I understood that like if I bought 4 condos, they would each break even. But if I bought 1 quadplex that had 1 mortgage, 1 set of utilities, 1 insurance policy, I could net 80 grand a year. So that's why I started the aggressive pursuit of that. Again, only focused on the financial side of things. The transition that I've had is that, I like the asset class of self-storage for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. I was attracted to it because it's not nearly labor intensive as short-term rentals. I would say that with the exception of maybe, flipping houses, short-term rentals is probably one of the most active investment strategies that you can have. It's a business.
Yeah.
Storage is a combination, just like you said, of real estate and business, but it's very, very easy to automate, streamline QR codes, touchscreen kiosks, automatic accounting and things like that. And people are paying automatically through their phone typically. So that attracted me to it. But from the financial aspect, it was the conversion strategy. Like if you and I go, and I'm getting to something that's so much more important than just real estate and money here. But if you and I go build a self-storage facility from the ground up, it's going to cost us $120 a square foot plus the cost of the land. And it's going to take us about 3 years to do the entitlement, permitting, engineering, and everything else. And then we've got to fill it up, right? So across the last 3.5 years, my partners and I have bought and converted 2 Kmarts, 3 warehouses, 2 textile mills, an old grocery store, and an old soda bottling facility. We got a boot factory and a carpet factory under construction right now, and 2 more under contract. Across the portfolio of the ones that we've completed, for the cost of the building, the land, the parking lot, the construction, everything, our average is just under $65 a square foot. And from the time we close on the property to the day that we open, it takes us about 12 months. So it's less than half the cost of construction. It includes the land, and it's in about 1/3 of the time. So that sounds like a great deal. Here's why it's important. Our goal is to land at the lowest loan to value that we possibly can. When we stabilize a facility, we're typically landing in the 38 to 40% loan to value range, which means we don't have to sell it for everybody to get a payday. We do a cash out refinance at 60% loan to value, always with fixed rate debt. That allows us to pay out all of the investors. It's tax free because it's not a capital gain. We didn't sell anything.
Yeah.
So everybody gets paid out through the refi, try to double everybody's money, but then we keep it. Everybody stays in, the investors stay in the deal. we can move on and invest into the next property or something else. And that's going to continue to cash flow. That is the key right there. Our goal is to break the cycle of trading time for money. If we are building facilities out, making them really nice and selling them, at the end of the day, we are glorified house flippers. And if you're a real estate agent, a wholesaler, a veterinary surgeon, or whatever you're doing, if you are trading time for money, the day that you stop working is the day that you stop getting paid. Right. So we have to, that's the delta that we have to jump, right? That's the value delta that we have to get over that hurdle of how do we have a recapitalization strategy to get our money back and keep it so that it continues to cash flow. And I'll tell you a quick story that I think will resonate. Our group is called Nomad Capital. The reason it's called Nomad Capital is because my partner, Eric Hemingway, had 5 kids and he was building houses. And in 2006, he built his first self-storage facility for himself. When the market crashed in 2008, it was still leasing up, but it had enough tenants that it was doing okay. Nobody was building anything, and he's a home builder. So everything stopped. So Eric and his wife, Rachel, and their 5 kids bought a 36-foot catamaran sailboat in Greece, sight unseen, and flew over there. And they were going to sail until the economy turned, right? Might be 6 months. Well, it ended up taking a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
6 months into the journey, they found out they were pregnant with their 6th kid. They stopped and had their 6th in Jerusalem and kept sailing. And they sailed for a total of 3.5 years. Eventually, they sailed all the way across the Mediterranean. And then they sailed across the Atlantic. And they landed back here in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we are. And then got back to building and got back to storage. And I met them a few years later. That idea of having 3.5 years with your family to travel the world because you have a commercial asset that is very easy to manage, that's paying for that lifestyle. That's the idea that sparked Nomad Capital, right? Is that we're all looking for that freedom of time, location, and finances so that we can pursue an independence of purpose. And there's something that I think is, especially recently, is something that I've really learned. Being a real estate nomad is going to look different to everybody. Right. And I think the question of why are we doing this is really important. Maybe your idea of being a real estate nomad or having that, independence of purpose is living on a sailboat in the Mediterranean. But maybe it's being able to be present when you have a family member that really needs you, or when you have someone that's ill, or when you need to be there to support someone. Like your independence of purpose might be construction or fly fishing or skiing or travel, or charity work, or building, whatever it may be. Hopefully, it's something where you're having a positive impact on your family and the community around you. But it could be selfish. It could be selfless. That's up to you. But I think we're all working for this idea of this independence of purpose without realizing, yes, it can be a vacation lifestyle, but it also can be that you're present when you really need to be there for somebody that really needs you in their life, or at the end of their life, whatever that means. And so in my mind, my goal is not to die with a bunch of stuff. My goal is to die with a giant stack of pictures of things that I did in beautiful places with people that I love. Because if I leave my boys a bunch of money with no stipulations, then 2 generations later, the money's probably gone and my grandkids are probably bad people. Yeah. But if I create an independence of purpose where I get to spend a lot more time with my children, and for me, that means travel, and not to nice, expensive places, travel to places that are impoverished, that is going to instill in them a sense of empathy and gratitude for where we live. We live on an island. It's not real life. It's fake. And I have a lot of qualms about raising my kids around too much money. So I think we need to balance that by experiencing the world and seeing other people that don't have that and instilling a sense of gratitude. So that's what it means for me, because my goal is to create time that I can spend with them so that hopefully it turns them into better people and leaves them with a level of character that dictates the type of relationship they want to have with their kids. And hopefully that continues on. I think that has a better chance of 5 generations from now them being better people than if I just left money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's interesting because I mean you mentioned sort of that vacation lifestyle is like I think a lot of people that are um, look at what you do from the outside and like talking about we increase the value from 3 million to 9 million and like now he's just going to go on vacation all the time, lucky guy, right? Like that's it's like it's not lucky. It's a lot of hard work that, as you said, like it's residual income that you get on these things, and it's a strategy that you have to implement and refine over 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years. Like
Right.
it's not like a one-off thing where you just won the lottery. Like there's a lot of work and strategy that goes into it. And so I think that's why like most of the people that ultimately achieve independence of purpose, that financial freedom, whatever someone wants to think about, most of those people they don't go to a vacation lifestyle. They continue working even when they don't have to, but they're working towards, like you mentioned, like whatever that purpose is, whatever that charity, that better life for outside of your own family that you can create. And I think it's just one of the coolest things for me. The very first like live real estate conference I went to was the best ever conference. I think it was 2021. The best part about that conference to me was listening to some of the people speak who had already been like extremely successful. I mean, Joe Fairless was one of them. They didn't talk about real estate. They talked about the impact they're now having because of real estate. Like it literally, like nothing. Like Joe Fairless didn't say anything about like, oh, he's like, here's my background. Like one slide. Here's my background. I syndicate. Blah blah blah. Now here's what I'm doing with that for my employees, the people, like the investors, like all of the like, and then outside of that, like a larger impact. And I'm like, yeah, that's the real reason to do all this stuff, is like to be able to expand beyond yourself and your own family. But like speaking of your own family, and you mentioned this, you want multiple generations because you're not passing down a pile of money, you're passing down principles and ethics and things like that. Like one of the most exciting things to me about all of this that we're building in the real estate and construction space is to have my kids involved in the work. Not like, yes, I want them to be, I don't want them to struggle, but I want them to be involved in the work that we do and the purpose that we have. I don't have to do what I do, but like understanding what the point of it all is to me the main purpose behind it all. I think, so it resonates with me what you're saying. That kind of that message behind it makes a lot of sense.
I totally agree. I think using Joe as an example is a great example. So we go to the best ever conference every year, and Joe's a mentor of ours. We have a monthly call with him, and I think that's a great example of I love seeing good things happen to good people, and I think a lot of times that as you have the level of success or you create that independence of purpose, I think it just exacerbates whatever type of person it is. If they're a selfish person, a lot of times you see them become
Yeah,
more selfish. If they're a
yeah,
selfless person and they're a giving person, a lot of times you see them have more opportunity to do that and embrace it. And I love that. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's so successful. So
yeah.
yeah, it's a great person to look up to and a great reference. So that's the idea. And like, let's be honest, there's nothing sexy about self storage. Like if we buy a big box of air and we chop it up into a bunch of small boxes of air and we rent it out to people. Now, you know, it that makes it sound pretty simple. The reality is, just like you said, there's a ton of science and data that goes into it. The construction is very difficult. We are the GCs. We're building it out in house, so we're doing the acquisitions, we're doing the construction, we're doing the property management, we're raising the capital, like we're doing all of it. And don't be fooled. Like we talk about passive income. Yes, it's passive for our limited partner investors. For me and for my partners, we're very much actively doing it.
Yeah.
Number one, because I'm a deal junkie. I love it. This is what I enjoy doing, and my goal is to not to do something I ever want to retire from. Now, my plan is when my boys are a little bit older to start traveling 2 to 3 months out of the year and
Yeah.
get that world experience that we were talking about. Um, but it's just storage, like it's just real estate. But what it represents and the opportunity that it has to break us free from trading time for money and for our investors, that's the exciting part, right? The rest of it is it's just what you said. It's just a vehicle. What we decide to do with that time is the important thing. You said your kids are about the same age as mine. So my son is 5 years old. So I probably have 13 more summers with him
Mm-hmm.
before he's gone, right? And
Yeah.
and they say that you spend 90% of your time with your kids before they move out. Okay, so in my previous life selling pacemakers and defibrillators, I got 3 weeks off or so a year, but you couldn't take that. Like my surgeons or my people, like they needed me. We're going into procedures together, so I felt guilty ever taking more than a week off. So like let's say we did 1 week a year family vacation, like dedicated family time vacation, not including
Yeah.
weekends. Like that's like 13 more weeks in his lifetime that I'm going to get that time dedicated. Like I took a step back to take a step forward in another direction with real estate with some delayed gratification for the first couple of years of building it up,
Yeah.
because I want to take 13 weeks a year to have that time, right? And over the next, if I've got 13 years with him, that's like 10x more dedicated time that I'm going to get to spend with my family, rather than having a more secure job with stable income that I'm, trading my time for money and paying for
Yeah.
somebody else's days off. That value delta is the most important thing to me, and I think that's something that I'm definitely not going to regret. It comes with a responsibility to make sure that we are using that time the right way. Yes, to enjoy it, but to try to turn them into strong men as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a the summers thing is like it's actually come up a lot just on the podcast, even just like people I connect with on LinkedIn or whatever. But it's something that is this past summer just that we just had was like the first. My son's also 5. He had they call it transitional kindergarten here in California. They didn't have that when I was a kid, but basically like he went to school at 4 in like the regular school system, and so that we had the regular school year where it was like all of a sudden my wife and I were like, what do we do with them in the summer? Like it wasn't a thing we had ever encountered before. It was like when before he went to regular school, we had daycare, and if we wanted to keep them out of daycare, we did, and it was like it was fine. We managed that schedule, but like with sure you can keep them out of sort of regular school here and there, but you can't just be like, oh yeah, don't go to school for a month. And so then that summer, the winter break in the summer becomes a big deal. Like it becomes a big deal for him. And as we're going through this summer and we're like not at the point where we can take the whole summer and travel, but it made me realize that is what I want. That is I want the summers free with them, because that's the real time that we have to spend together and build and all of that. And it's like you said, like it's just you don't it's stuff I hadn't even thought about. And then I was like, oh yeah, these summers are going to be hugely important because eventually they're going to end. He's not going to want to spend the whole summer with us. Like the kids they're going to have their own time. Like if they still want to spend the whole summer with us at 18, that'll be amazing. But even that, I suspect by then they'll have things they want to do and whatever. And
Sure.
so I think just like being aware of that fact and like the time the one of the great things about real estate is that we can do most of it from wherever you want to be. Like you talked about that sort of location independence, and it's like most of it it's like I can do a lot of what I need to do from my phone or my laptop or whatever, and be there when you need to be there. That's very different from medical sales. Like I know, like I have friends that are veterinary cardiologists. Like a pacemaker needs to go when a pacemaker needs to go. It's not That's not like I'll just do this whenever it's convenient. There are
Right.
certain things, and I have the same thing in the surgery world. Like there are certain things that it cannot wait, or else the patient dies. And so it's like the beauty of real estate is that's not going to happen. Like, yeah, things come up. You have, sort of urgencies, but like it's not a thing where it's like, oh, you have to do this right now, this hour, or, something dies. And so it is just, I would rather have my urgencies directed towards things that are like my family, my life, like directly. I want to help. I still want to help animals and all that, but I want actually what I want to do it is by empowering other vets to understand how to get some of this financial independence so that they can make their choices and be able to help more animals. Like to me, it's like just creating this trickle down effect. It's the same thing with investors in general. It's like if we make their lives better, they can make other lives better as well.
A lot of times, one of the things that I see is when people reach that freedom point, a lot of times they do keep doing the same thing that they were doing it before, sometimes with a different motivation, sometimes it was
Yeah.
because they needed a paycheck. A lot of times you see people start to walk away from that life and then realize that they chose it for a reason and keep doing it. But there's this definitive shift in their attitude
Yeah.
because when you do it and it's a choice, it's very different than when you're forced to do it and you start getting that anxiety on Sunday evening thinking about the next morning. When you do it because it's a choice and you get to choose how that energy is spent and you want to empower other people to see the joy in it, and you're not doing it just because you're trading your time for money. It's a beautiful thing. And the funny thing is, like, you're doing the same thing. You're getting up, you're driving to the same place, you're
Yeah.
in the same car, but there is a difference when you're doing it because it's your purpose and you find joy in it and you want to help other people have success in it as well, versus when you're forced to do it. And maybe that's just a little mental shift, but it does. I see that happening over and over, and it always jumps out at me.
Oh yeah. No, I mean it was exactly the case for. I mean, I love doing surgery. Like it's something that I mean it I love working with my hands. I love fixing, kind of surgeries, the most medical version of being in construction, right? Like it's just
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
a similar feel to me. And when I was doing my training and I was there all the time, like I always loved it. And at some point it really did shift to a job. I no longer got excited about going to work. It was like it was a job, it was a paycheck. And that was a part of when, kind of I didn't even know that this would happen, but like when I made a shift in my life and I got more heavily into real estate and it became something where I was back to doing surgery again because I enjoy it. And like it really is it really is a thing that I actually I would love more people to experience it. Like if you got into something like that, it's probably because you were passionate about it. Like, and if it no longer feels that way, there's reasons and a potential fix for it. And so I think it's just it wasn't something that I anticipated. Like I sort of thought, oh, I'm going to still keep doing surgery because it generates income, but it's not even that anymore. Like I enjoy it. I always enjoy it. Like it's just a place where I have fun. Like the OR is a place that I have fun, and it's um, if that goes away, it may not be because you don't enjoy whatever it is anymore. It might just be because it's representing something else to you, and finding other ways to restructure, whether that's through uh, investing or whatever it is. Like finding ways to restructure can make such a big change in the feel about the thing that we spend most of our time doing. Usually is kind of whatever career we've chosen. So
I love
I just
that.
think it was a great feeling experience for me to have that shift back, and I hope that more people experience it too.
I hope so too. That's why I'm passionate about what we do, is that I get to see people experience that journey. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, great. Well, Clint, let me switch gears and get to ask you the questions I ask every guest. I think some of this we've probably touched on. You know, the name of the podcast is Know Your Why, and so I always ask everyone, "What is your why?" And I think I've gotten a really good sense from you, kind of where your heart lies. But I wanted to give you a chance to expand on it. Is if there's anything you want to add to sort of that real purpose.
Yeah. So my why is obviously family and time. Um, the reality is I'm a pretty impatient person. Um, I don't think I'm like naturally a great dad. I get really impatient, and you know, I think it's probably wise that I waited till later in life to have kids. But there's still a lot that I have to get better at, and because of that, like I know that you know, the most important thing for me is to try to raise boys that are going to be a better version than I was starting out as a dad, right? And so I think the best way for me to do that is, like, first of all, acknowledge the things that I need to work on and continue to do that with my wife and with our sons. And besides that, just try to create a healthy environment so that they grow up to be the right kind of people that, 100 years from now, you and I are gone. 100 years after that, people have said my name for the last time, right? But if I'm still going to have people on the planet, I'd like to live my life in such a way that it has lasting resolve on creating character down the line that's going to last longer than any money that I could raise. So that's my why. Is like, I want to die with that giant stack of pictures of things I did in beautiful places with people that I love, and I want to experience the world, and along with that, create a sense of empathy and gratitude, and hopefully those are things that get passed down to my sons.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Um, Tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge. Special skill, a hobby, anything you want to share to let listeners know you better.
Yeah, I'm a very avid fisherman. I live at the beach. I do a lot of spearfishing and scuba diving. So I go out about 30, 40 miles, dive 95 to 120 feet deep, and shoot big grouper in the face with a spear gun and catch lobsters, and go offshore trolling for mahi mahi and wahoo and things like that. And I love to cook. So that's my love language. I like to go out with friends, catch a bunch of fish, come back, and then cook and have a big family and friend dinner.
That's great. I've never been I've never liked fishing because I'm also not a patient person. The idea of like sitting and waiting for something to happen, but fishing like that sounds actually really appealing.
Yeah,
Like
it's instant
combining with a dive.
gratification.
Yeah,
Yeah, you pick the one that you want and just blast them. That's
yeah, yeah. That sounds a lot better. I'm like, that's the way to go fishing. No one ever told me to do that before. Like that's it. That fits far more with the way I like to do things. When people hear this and they want to get in touch, what's the best way?
The best way to do that is you can connect with us through our website. It's nomadcapital.us, or you can schedule a call with me there, or people can just email me, clint@nomadcapital.us. I raise capital for self storage, but I'm an investor first. So I'm always happy to connect with anybody about Airbnb or storage or syndication, limited partnership, anything like that. I'm an extrovert, and I'm always happy to connect. So feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Last question for you, Clint. What piece of advice would you give to someone who, they hear this, they are motivated by your story, want to get started? Where would you tell them to start? What's a good kind of jumping off point?
I think the first thing that you have to have is you need to understand your goal and your timeline. And I would encourage people to write out, in 10-year increments, your age. And then in another column, put, your relationship, your health, your financial goals, your time and location independence goals. And then at 40 years old, write it out. Like, what do I want my relationship with my spouse to look like? What do I want my time and travel to look like? And write that out for the next, 30, 40 years, whatever you have, and create a strategy around that. Don't do what I did and build it up wrong because you're just chasing dollars the first time. think of it from a time, financial, and location independence lifestyle. What you decide to do with that is going to be different for everybody. But build it around that, put a timeline to it, and that will help steer you in the right direction. And I highly encourage people to network, listen to podcasts, and look for strategic partnerships, because you're going to have three things to have success: time, experience, and money. You need to take a self-inventory. If you have all three of those things, great. Go learn to do deals and operate on your own. Small multifamily, small commercial strip centers, something like that. If you don't have all three of those things, then you need to look at what you do have and look for strategic partnerships. Like, I think you're a smart guy, right? You're in California. That's a money state. Well, where's your real estate? It's on the East Coast, because that's a deal state, right? You can't afford to invest where you are, so you're investing someplace else. You know what you have. You have capital there, and you're looking for a deal someplace else. You can do the same thing with strategic partnerships. So put a timeline to it, put a goal to it, and work backwards from there.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, Clint, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed this conversation. I think people can get a lot out of it, just hearing your story, and kind of the purpose is definitely bigger than just real estate. Real estate's a vehicle, and it can be a pretty great vehicle. But yeah, I think understanding that's not the goal is to not just have a pile of money or as many buildings as possible. Like, it's really about much more than that. So thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for everything that you shared.
Yeah, thank you for your platform. I enjoyed the time together, so appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks listening, make sure you connect with Clint, and please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. Thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?